Hey everybody, Tom Henderson from RESGEN here, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the RESGEN Giving Life Podcast, where we hear stories and have conversations about life in Christ, everyday discipleship, and ways that we as men can give life to others. Before we get into today's show, I want to remind you that RESGEN Men's Summit 2023 is just around the corner. This half-day event, which takes place on Saturday, February 4th, goes from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. and brings over 1,000 men together for 5 hours of encouragement, laughter, and impact. In addition to myself, this year's speakers include Dallas Cowboys chaplain Jonathan Evans, Pastor Ricky Jenkins, comedian and pastor Ted Cunningham, and New York Times bestselling author John Acuff. Tickets for the summit are only $30, and I can't encourage you enough to grab your ticket to join us either in person in Sioux Falls or via live stream at resgen.org. And while you're there, you can also pick up your tickets for RESGEN's couples event, Date Night Comedy, which is happening prior to the summit on February 2nd and 3rd. All right, I'm excited to be joined today by someone who has played a huge role in my life for over 30 years as a friend, a father figure, a mentor, and as a ministry partner. Alan Kjesbo is a husband, a father, and a grandfather who recently retired after 44 plus years in full-time ministry, 30 of those years serving as a youth pastor. On today's show, Alan and I discuss some of the biggest things he learned during his 3 decades of working with teenagers and how those lessons helped him and his wife, Denise, plant a church in their second season of ministry. We also talk about some of the challenges he needed to overcome as a child and how those helped move him towards a career of serving others. And of course, we also visit about some of the favorite memories I have from being a teenager in his youth group, from living with his family during my senior year in high school and freshman year of college, and planting a church with him. I cannot wait for you to hear this conversation with Alan Kjesbo. Alan, this is so fun to have you on the podcast. Thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Man, this is going to be so fun. You know, to have you sitting at this table is just it's as I started thinking about just this podcast. So this is like episode 50 something. And to have you here is just such a fun thing for me, just because of all the different roles that you've held in my life. We're going to get into that in a second. But before we do that, I'd love for you just to introduce yourself quickly to the listeners. Many will know you, some will not. So just a little bit about you, your family, and anything else that you want to share here right off the top, and then we're gonna dig right in today.
Okay, I'll start with going back a long ways because it kind of does. I'm realizing some of those things really have impacted me. Youngest of 4 children, of a family that thought they had 3. So I was always literally being forgotten. They'd get home and go, "Is there somebody missing?" And the sad part where they'd be able to say no, and I'd have to walk to grandma or grandpa's house and kind of say, "You forgot me. Can you come and get me?" "Oh yeah." So that sense of built-in insignificance kind of deal was a part of growing up. So grew up in a family of 4. We all went to church. Church was a regular part. I mean, if the doors are open, we went there. And church was a place of blessing for me. Also, some dark sides of church. And then went to Bethel College, which was a great experience for me to leave Eau Claire and see a bigger world and be a part of Minneapolis and St. Paul and understand, my word, the world is big, scary, and also wonderful. And there's a place. You can find a place. So my senior year, we lived in North Minneapolis. Moved off the college campus and got into the thick of it. And that was a great experience. And then went to Sioux Falls Seminary, and then first ministry was Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, first after graduation. Then came back to Faith Baptist, where I was during seminary, and then at First Baptist, and then the point is to serve. So had different church experiences in Sioux Falls, which is pretty unusual, but it kind of fits my pretty unusualness.
Right, yeah. Okay. And you've been married to Denise for how long?
Oh, several years.
Yes, a few.
Yes, 42 maybe this December 31st.
Okay. So 42 years, and then you have 2 kids.
2 children who have just been a source of joy. So Jordan is a United Methodist Church pastor in Vermilion. Just one of those great surprises to see him move towards ministry. Would not have seen that coming. he didn't have a lot of words growing up, and now he's using his words well in Vermilion, and is being gracious and wonderful, and really fun to see him becoming a great shepherd and caregiver of the people there. And then Emily is a math teacher in the St. Paul Public Schools. Takes on a crazy group, a lot of international or people with international background. So she's learning how to really be relational. She keeps saying that she's not doing ministry, and I keep correcting her. Because, boy, how she does math teaching in the St. Paul Public Schools is a significant ministry. I'm so proud of her. And then Jordan and his wife Faith have 2 children, 7 and 4, who we had for an overnight last night and got to build a snow fort with them, and gives me an excuse to be outside. So we just have a great time with them. And then Emily and Ryan adopted 2 children in their, Kiki was 14 at the time, and Kevon was 10. And now, 7 years later, today, Kiki's going to be delivering a baby. And so last night, heard that Kiki's was on the way to the hospital. So within 45 minutes, Emily was on an airplane flying to Rapid City to get picked up, and she's with her daughter now giving as her daughter gives birth. So it's amazing to see my kids become parents, and it's just so sweet, so good.
Wow, that's amazing. Thanks for just that quick little introduction. And I just want to go and tell everybody all these different roles that you've held in my life. And this is people will be like, this is like a menu, and you have to choose. Well, you didn't get to choose. You actually served in these roles in my life. Youth pastor at First Baptist throughout the entirety of my teen years. Then another role was really you were a father to me. As you, and I knew I was going to end up needing probably some Kleenexes for the podcast, today. but that when at a time in my life that I really needed that presence. In my life, and to the point where you and Denise even welcomed me into your home to live a good portion of my senior year of high school and my freshman year of college, a very exploratory time in my life and figuring out who I was. You were our wedding officiant as you married Laura and I, as we're approaching now 26 years of marriage, just a few days prior to your 42nd wedding anniversary. You've been a ministry partner because you hired me as a college coordinator back in the day when I was still in college, and we started Powerhouse Ministry. Worship service, but then even prior to that, as I was as a youth in the youth ministry, starting the Glimpse of Glory service and leading worship and on the drama team. And all that.
Yes.
Other ways that you were a ministry partner to me was when I was out being a youth pastor in Portland, Oregon, where, by the way, the entirety of my youth ministry looked a lot like the First Baptist ministry, as I basically
imitation is a wonderful compliment. Yes,
I modeled my youth ministry after you did, but it was so fun to have you come out to my church where I was youth pastoring, and my pastor Chris May and his wife, they're going to be on the next podcast that release after this one that you and I are doing right now. But I brought you out to speak at our fall retreat, and that was so fun to just introduce you to my youth group out there. And then after we moved back to Sioux Falls in 2005, you were in the process of leaving First Baptist, and we planted a church together. And I got to lead worship alongside of you at the Point Is to Serve for 3 years. And so that's a long list of roles, and I hope you know that as I was writing all those down, I just was smiling with every single one of them because of how important you've been in my life for now over 30 years. So right off the top, I just want to say thank you for the role that you played in my life.
What a blessing and joy. And to say that I'm proud of you kind of makes it sound like anyway, I celebrate. Maybe that's the best way. Just who you are, the father you've become, the husband you are. It's a blessing to just watch you do your thing.
Well, I say this a lot to people when they talk about just where I am and ask a lot of questions. I say really, it's because God has placed people in my life throughout the entirety of my life that have invested in me, that saw potential in me when necessarily I didn't see that potential in myself. And so that's been just a really powerful thing. And even just, being invited to live in your home, and being able to see you and Denise model a healthy marriage. And how important that was, although it was a brief time and it was during a time where I was wrestling with so much stuff in my head and heart, and just trusting that I could come and live with you as long as I did my one chore a week, whether it was bathrooms or the dusting or vacuuming, I believe.
And with one of the kids, didn't you pair you up?
Well, no,
with a trainer?
Well, I'm sure I had to be trained. Although my mom did a pretty good job. She really liked cleaning and so forth.
Yes.
So I knew how to clean. But yeah, and allowing me to come in and have Jordan and Emily as a little brother and a little sister was just so fun and so important. So thank you for that. And I do want to ask, so as you think about just you already kind of went into a little bit of your childhood and your upbringing. And obviously I sat underneath your teaching in youth ministry. And then at the point in your lead pastor preaching, and knowing so much of your story and from, being bullied and not being able to feel like you could, that you speak. I remember you said you couldn't pronounce the sound.
And I hate the sound.
And then you yourself, you kind of became this, you're kind of a big kid and kind of pushed some other kids around and a lot of those. But all of those things were very formative in your life that really led you towards what God had in mind for you and how he wanted to use you. So I'd love for you just to kind of explain how some of your childhood, even overcoming that fear of public speaking, all the challenges you had, how that really kind of helped launch you or pave the way for you to be in a lifetime of service and ministry.
For sure, as a kid, I didn't see it. I didn't see these things. In fact, if I could just tell a story, maybe this one. As a Bethel University, maybe a sophomore, junior, a friend of mine was a social worker, and he said, "Come be with me on Hennepin Avenue. We'll be transients. I want you to see how people respond to transients." So we dressed up as, homeless people, and we're walking on the street, and happened to see my 9th grade health teacher, Mr. Nash. And he recognized me, much to my chagrin. And I'm saying, "Mr. Nash," he goes, "It's okay. It's okay. You don't have to explain. It's good to see you." And he was a nice teacher to me. He was a good teacher. I think he believed in me. But he thought, when he saw me as a homeless person, a street person in Minneapolis, that was exactly where he saw me going. And he did it graciously and was very supportive of me. But I was one of those kids who, tough-looking kid, prone to being angry and violent, that when he saw me, it was like, "Oh, okay, yeah." That's kind of how I've wondered if he saw me at Bethel, if he thought I was a homeless student dressed up as a Bethel student. Like, wow, that's a good acting job. So it's not a criticism of him. It's just a chance to say, where did God change my life? And how did it do it so that so many different outcomes my life could be? Even the marriage to Denise and raising 2 amazing children who love me. I grew up with most of my camp friends who were pastors' sons hating their dads. And that was a fear of going into ministry. Does that mean that my kids have to hate me? And now at this place of just, Emily and Ryan invite us on vacation with them, it's like, we love it, but that's like, I would never invite my parents on vacation. Like, this is my chance to get rid of them. And Jordan, Faith, and Hazel and Henry, we just have dinners together and just so many good times. So where did God change me? And I would look back to one, I'd call him senior pastor. Now, he was my pastor. And I was just a kid in the youth group, and yet somehow he saw me as somebody who, like, he would ask me to pray, do the pastoral prayer when I was still stuttering and couldn't pronounce sound. I mean, in a sense, what a ridiculous thing to do. And yet he he came out and was helping us build our house, and my dad hit a 2x4 in his head and was just blood gushing everywhere. My pastor was there. And he took my dad to the hospital. And there were times where Pastor Flowberg just kind of communicated that I mattered. He saw me, the Elroy, Hagar in the Old Testament, the God who sees me, even in the wilderness. And God, again, did I realize it? No, but now as I think back in my life, I see all the places where I said, nobody knows I'm even here. But God sees me. And that just has been such a wonderful thing to sit with as I now look, not as chapters of my life, but kind of as my life from being a student, grade schooler, student, whatever. And to see people who God put in my life, got forgotten. She said, hey, come, I'll take you home. And she had a 66 Mustang. It's like, I win. So all the times where I looked around and I felt like I was forgotten, there were people who helped me see God sees me. And so many things were kind of stacked against me with my speech impairment, going to a tiny school, Little Red, which was little and red. 25 kids in my class, and then being dumped into a 2,000-member junior high where the bus driver said, go in that door. That was the only preparation. And then where do you go? What do you do? And having about 1,900 of those students wanting to make sure that you knew that you talked weird, and the teacher being a bully to me in one hallway situation. But yet there were people who I guess I knew who saw me and cared. And so that has really shaped my ministry as I look back on the kids, not just the kids who attended, but the kids who I knew were at church, and I wanted them to know I saw them. And I cared about them. And one little boy in Edmonton at our church was just being picked on relentlessly because he was the smallest kid in middle school. So what do kids do? Well, they pick on the smallest kid. And I wanted him to know he was safe at our church, and he was noticed and he was cared about. And so those kind of things.
That's really good. And I would say for listeners and viewers, what Alan's speaking about is what that is how you lived and how you ministered from the first time I met you as one of those little junior hires, little 98-pound soaking wet 8th grade Tommy Henderson back in the day, and then to the point of you being lead pastor at the point, and we'll get into that here in a little while as well, but of just consistently seeing people and always finding those people that were alone, and wanting to make sure that they felt welcome. And I just think about, that's what Jesus did, right? I mean, he just saw people and he just made them know that they were important. And so I think about just even for those that are not working in ministry, which I mean is the vast majority of guys, right? And they're out in business, complexes, or they're out in town, downtown meetings, whatever. But there are unseen people wherever we are. Yeah. Wherever we are. And for us who are striving to be men who are becoming more and more like Jesus, I don't know that there's more of a powerful way for us to enter each day with a mindset of, God, help me see people today, specifically that are unseen.
Yeah.
Because because like we just said, they're everywhere.
And the power that we have to make a difference in their life. And certainly a child who's coming to church kind of hopes for it and expects that. But there's people who we see at the grocery store, at Menards.
Yeah. Which, by the way, if you have shopped in Menards in Sioux Falls, you've seen Alan. He's there 8 times a day.
Exactly. But the ability to smile, to celebrate them. Reggie McNeil, an author who was influential in my life, said, agree or disagree with this, but evangelism isn't working in the United States. If it take out longer life expectancy, the church is going backwards. He said, maybe we need to move from evangelizing to blessing. And I've really, that struck me because I can do that. And people aren't afraid to bless one another, to acknowledge that they're there, to care about them, to speak kind words to them. When somebody makes a mistake checking out, to say, that's okay. I appreciate you that you're here.
Yeah.
And so what does it look like for us to bless that as Denise has a phrase that when we work with children's ministry, that when we're bumped, what splashes out? And she wants her children's worker and her children's leaders, who she's training all over the world, that when a child bumps them, they are soaked with the love of God versus anger and frustration and expectations without any support. So Denise has so many good phrases, but that's, what splashes out. So if I'm bumped, at a store, what splashes onto the people next to me? And I hope it's the love of God in some way. And that comes through a sense of blessing. And if we can bless, maybe the church will get back to the mission of evangelizing because we will have prepared the ground.
Yeah. Well, and that's such a good, that's such a good reminder. Again, for everybody, no matter what context they're working in, I mean, or what their family makeup is or whatever, because we all have a tendency to respond in a certain way, like maybe a certain go-to. But again, if we're entering with a mentality of, I'm just going to bless people today. Yeah. And that can potentially, whether that leads to something or not, maybe it just leads with them just being surprised. Like, oh, you're not mad at me, for whatever, right?
Yes.
And so, I think about just, mistakes that I've made as a dad where, if I was bumped, proverbially, or just like hypothetically bumped in some way, right? And my initial with it would be the frustration and whatever. And so it takes work. It takes work to retrain and to reframe our mindset to that, but when we are desiring to just be more and more like the Lord, I just feel like that's just a given. Like that just has to happen. So let me ask you this: as a benefactor of someone who was welcomed into your home, you kind of had a revolving door or an open door for a lot of people. And I remember when I needed a place when I was a senior year. My mom had gotten remarried and moved to California, and going into my senior year, and that was not a great time for me to kind of be picking up and moving from Sioux Falls to California, and through a variety of circumstances. I needed some regularity and a place to stay. And you already had someone living with you at the time. You had your niece.
Yes, Carrie.
You had your niece Carrie living, and you thought, well, what's one more that we have living? And you welcome me into your home, and I already said, like, yes, there was a chore list or whatever, but it wasn't, hey, this is your curfew. This isn't. We're placing all these rules on you. We're not going to try to control you. We're just going to ask for respect and that we honor here and all this kind of thing. It was something that I really needed. Yeah. So let me ask you, what prompted you and Denise to, not just only with me, but I'm just saying in general, allow people to just move in?
Well, you're not going to believe it, but there's a story behind that. Denise and I were reading the Gospels at one point, and came to John the Baptist's message of, when the people say to him with the Messiah coming, what do you want us to do? And he has a very physical response to that question. If you've got 2 shirts, share it. If somebody asks you to walk a mile, walk 2. I mean, it's a sense of, so we looked around as super poor seminary students involved in 2 lawsuits. And we're going to lose everything. And we literally said, what do we have 2 of? And it dawned on us, we've got a 2-bedroom house. Okay, so we'll share it. And then about a couple weeks after that, a friend of mine from high school was being transferred to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and then the whole banking industry. She was a federal, whatever those people do. Anyway, so she ended up staying with us for, I think, about 4 months before she got on her feet and was on her own. And it's like, that was good. Family has those balls that expand and collapse. A family can have that. And she wasn't just at that point we didn't have children, but she became, family with us. And then we just started having individuals, and we even had a family with 2 young children live with us. But part of it was just saying, okay, we can share. And the sense of house is an isolating thing for us. Just became very clear that a house should be an inclusive experience. So we had a house, so let's share it. And for ministry, I thought it was, one, I think the most significant ministry I've had is at home. Mm. And that doesn't mean just to Jordan, Emily, and Denise. That means anybody who enters our doors is ministry. And out of that comes my ministry to the church. So we didn't do that so that you would go to the youth group.
Right.
But we knew that the kids were going to ask you, so what's it like?
Yeah.
What's it like being behind the curtain at the Kjesbo house? And we wanted to be, and I think you did reply by saying, well, it's pretty much like how you see Alan here. That there isn't that Christian pastor and parent are 2 different things, that it's really kind of just one thing, with obviously the voice changes a little bit as you talk to your children and your family members. But that was just the integrity of ministry. And we found that because we didn't have people do chores, we had them do family responsibilities.
Yes.
And so we had a friend from Edmonton go to seminary. So she lived with us 3 years, and she helped us with, watching Emily and Jordan when they were young. We'd have a date night. So it really blessed us. But in the blessing, she was also blessed. So when we think of ministry, so often we don't even think of our home being a ministry, which is a crazy, ironic thing that people are just not cluing into. Mm-hmm. And if you've got a home, I think one of the things in retirement we'd like to do, we were going to do this before COVID hit, but we want to have 2 families from our block over, not next door neighbors, but 2 families in our kind of funny street who may not know each other. We have to everybody knows we're a pastor, so people are afraid of us,
They're coming.
Yeah. And we're going to
they're on a walk again.
Headlock, to say, okay, hey, did you know we have church service? So we want to have it where we're outnumbered, But when our kids are young, we knew everybody in the neighborhood.
Sure.
But now everybody has changed over 2, 3, 4 times. And so we really don't hardly know anybody. So we want to use our home to connect with people in our neighborhood again when we kind of get past this crazy COVID-ness, and we don't know exactly how to do it, but that's one of the things we want to do, and make time to make our home again. Different than having somebody live with us, but in a sense we live together in that street at least, and
that's great.
Use your home for that.
Yeah, and I think, I think that gives vision to, it doesn't necessarily mean that, look, you got an extra room, you've got to fill it with someone. If the Lord says, hey, you should do that, you should do that. And you felt very, as Denise and you were going through that scripture, and you both felt moved to do that. And that became a big part of your life and so many other people's lives because of your obedience. But to view your home as a place of ministry, may all who enter here, feel the presence of the Lord, and know that they are welcome. Maybe
even beyond enter, just touching, just rubbing shoulders, with our neighbors. Mm-hmm. And we have a new dog now for over a year, but I've decided when I'm walking with Lila, because she doesn't like to do her business in our yard, so we need to walk her. I've decided
that's perfect. Yeah, in everybody else's yard.
Well, we pick it up, make it. That's part of being a good neighbor too.
Yeah, that's right.
But I've decided I'm going to talk to everybody I see.
Yeah,
and just try to. So we walk beyond our street, and I just want to try to do better at being connected to my neighborhood.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. Well, and so I just was recording a leadership podcast with a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago, and I was just talking about the whole idea of ministry really happens off the stage, and so what you're speaking about is ministry on the stage is important,
Yes,
it is important, but different and sometimes more important ministry happens off the stage, because that's where people see the real you, right? Yeah. And one of the things that I always talk about, and when I say, that 3 men during my formative years really invested a lot in me. Reed DeVries, whom you know, and I know that he's been an important individual in your life as well, for sure. So. You, and then Chris May, and I always look at it just like there's different things that you all brought to the table that I gleaned and learned from, and from Reed's, it was really in the way that I think, and trying to think differently about things, look at different angles, and not just come in with this, well, it's got to be this one way, but really, we're never going to get the right answer by asking the wrong question idea. And then when I think about you, it's always just this attitude of service that you've always had, and that I got to witness, because it's easy to say, oh, that's a person that does that on the stage or in a boardroom or wherever. But when you really see how they live life and how they, how they are in the morning, and you made pancakes very well, by the way, but that's who you are, is a servant-hearted person. I mean, through and through, 100% all the time. You'll do anything for anyone, not even just, people that you like, that you're just automatically drawn to. You just go and you'll serve anyone, and that's where even just going and launching the church in 2007, right?
Yeah, first service in 2008. I left First Baptist in 2007.
Yeah, but we started kind of planning and doing our meetings and different things like that. And then we launched like Easter, I believe, in 2008. We had our 3 preview services and all that. See, I remember it all.
We did the textbook case here.
Yeah, I remember it all. But even the idea of what to call the church was something that was super perplexing to me at the time. And I was like, when you asked my opinion, I'm like, I don't know. I mean, never really heard of a church with a declarative statement as the title of it, because it was like, what about Journey Church and all these, the trendy, action words that the churches are. And you're like, no, I really think that because service is who we need to be, because service is who you are, and who you continue to be, even though now you're officially retired from ministry. But you said, no, because the whole point of our life in Christ is to serve others. Why? Because that's what Jesus came, right? He came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. And for you to really cast that vision to myself and the rest of the planting team and those that, wanted to come and help kind of create the core group that would become the point is to serve. And we did kind of shorten it to the point because it was easier to say. But the whole focus of the church was to serve. And how do we just make that the fabric of our lives and our church's life? So I'm interested in, as you worked in youth ministry for 30 years, and I believe when I text you and asked you exactly how many years was it, and you said 30, but like it actually counts as dog years, I believe you said.
Yeah, 7 years. Yeah, dog years and youth ministry years are the same. Science has proven that. I think. So 210 years of ministry.
So I am interested in just, were there some kind of like youth ministry lessons and experiences that you had that were helpful in launching the point? Yeah. And what would 1 or 2 of those be?
Well, let me give some background. Erwin McManus, originally the book was called Crash. I can't remember what you renamed it. But he challenged me, and when I read it, he said, don't measure success by your calendar, measure it by transformation. So there's a lot of churches with full calendars. Right? And we look at our calendars and go, oh man, we are a great church. Look how busy we are. But the question is that business producing transformation? So it kind of went through youth ministry and said, where were the points of transformation? As much as we'd like to scare kids at Clue, that was a interactive game that we scared literally the hell out of kids. I don't know if there was much transformation per se. Sure. But standing on the curb in New Orleans after Katrina, where we'd taken everything out of this woman's house, and on top of the pile is this baseball glove. And she says to the kids, I want to tell you how blessed I am by God. And we're looking at saying, I'm sorry, we do not understand how you can say that. Because we've just hauled everything out of your house, including your drywall, and we put it on the curb, and you're going to tell us how blessed you are? I mean, those moments of standing with people, standing beside them, giving our energy for their redemption, if you understand what I'm trying to say in that, to partner with them. Those were the points where I thought, okay, we've got the gospel in our heads, but now it's as my theology professor would say, it's where the mustard meets the hot dog. And for these kids to have learned Bible lessons and heard sermons, but to also now, and they're not there as workers, they're there as partners in the gospel. Those were the points. And so for us, it's more than service. It is our pathway to discipleship. Because I think discipleship starts, if we understand Jesus' message, when I say, I'm busy, but I will pause my busyness because somebody needs me. And I think Jesus says, okay, I can work with that. You don't need to know 100 Bible verses, but you're starting to act like me and saying that person's needs may be greater than yours. And so transforming through service is this process that not only do we want our service to encourage somebody and to help them and to bless them, but ultimately in me saying, they matter to Jesus, and so they matter to me. And now my schedule has to be changed and maybe even inconvenienced because Jesus cares about them. I think that is the heart of discipleship. And it certainly includes knowledge, but it also includes doing. Yeah. And so, is that? Yeah.
Yeah. That's so good. And that was one thing that you really did a great job in that. Then I emulated and replicated,
Amen.
Copied in Oregon, was creating those experiences for opportunities and to grow and something like a Mount Robson hike, of just look at that.
I wore that. I thought about my wardrobe today.
But I mean, and the experience of going and hiking and dealing with things that you normally don't get in the city and how that can challenge you, and then the parallels that has to our faith, and then taking us to Mexico and building homes at Casas del Como Cristo, I think is what it was called, which again I copied that for my mission trip in Oregon too. But and then even just the way that we should probably talk, I think, real briefly about some memories.
Sure. Can I just go back to Mount Robson?
Yeah.
Because it's, again, discipleship.
Yeah.
So my role was to be the sweeper, to help kids carry some of their stuff. And I remember getting up to Berg Lake. It's about a 15-mile hike that takes 2 days, and you're carrying everything with you. And we're just starting to die at the end. And we hear this sound of footsteps, and they're running towards us. And it was kids who got to the top of the mountain, set their stuff down. They were tired, right? They'd carried everything they needed to carry. But instead of saying, I'm going to sit here till everybody gets here, they ran to meet the group of kids who are struggling. I mean, just hearing that because you can't see them because it's all wooded, and the paths are winding, and to hear people running towards you to help you, that just is one of those times that your life has changed. And they were joyful in the process. So anyway, But Mexico, we had to deal with some very strong disciplinary issues sometimes with some of our young people, right, Tom?
Yeah. So there's several stories that come to mind that I wasn't necessarily what you would call a star student all the time in the old cross training youth ministry at
Conditioning
First
for
Baptist.
Excellence.
Yes, exactly.
That's
but I did keep things interesting.
Yes.
And one of those the memories that I think we should share, because I think people will get a kick out of it, and it's just fun to talk about it, is when we go down to Mexico. And I'm 16 years old. And at the time, and I don't know if this is still the case, I have no clue, but it's at the time, at age 16, you could buy beer in Mexico.
Right.
And so I thought, you know,
especially if you're on a mission trip.
Right. So I thought, what a great idea to bring home some souvenirs for all of my friends. But to go and buy a 6-pack of Tecate and you know, bring it home as a souvenir, kind of as a way to say, yep, I did this and whatever. So we're having like a group meal one night, and I'll never forget this. We got a group meal, and the food's taking a long time. We ordered or whatever. We're at this restaurant, and then I decided this is my shot to go to this little convenience store next to the restaurant and purchase this 6-pack of cerveza. This Tecate cerveza, and so I brought it
Spanish.
and I brought it back in. I didn't know a lot of Spanish, but I knew that word. So I brought it back in a brown paper bag and just kind of sat it beside me. You know, ate dinner and whatever, and then I carried it back to the bus and promptly put it in my dirty underwear bag because I thought that's, you know,
it's the aging process.
And I thought, well, you know, no one will ever look in there, and you know, whatever. Well, somehow I think it was the voice of the Lord, or you know, somebody ratted me out. I don't know.
I think somebody ratted you out, Tom. To be honest, I don't want to make you feel paranoid, but I didn't go through your underwear. Believe it or not, I did not touch your underwear
because I knew that'd be off limits. But yeah, I think somebody kind of ratted me out, and you caught wind that I potentially had some contraband materials that
crossing the international border.
I was going to bring home. So you just kind of let it go. It was a couple nights before I think we were coming back home. So we get to the border. And we're told over the intercom that we've got to take everything off the bus because the border patrol people got to search through the stuff, make sure no one's bringing back anything they shouldn't be bringing back, what have you. So I'm like immediately fearful, you know, and I'm like, I'm going to go down. This is going to be like, tell my mom I love her, you know, that kind of thing. So I thought, I'm going to outsmart him though. I'm going to take everything off but the dirty underwear bag and the duffel bag, you know, that's up in the compartment of the bus.
That's what you did.
So I just left it up in the thing. And so we go through the deal and it's sitting, all the luggage is out, and that, you know, the guards are walking by with their dogs and blah, blah, blah. Well, so anyway, so we all loaded back on. But was that all part of, was this, now,
see,
to be clear,
I was hoping you'd get caught. How's that for gracious, huh? One, I knew they wouldn't put you in jail for it, but I thought that'd be just a great logical consequences for you. So, yeah, feel free to check out Tom's stuff. Yeah. I didn't know that you'd left it in the bus, you little weasel.
Yeah, I did. And so I left it in the bus, and we all get back on. And then, but you knew I had it.
Yeah, somehow I knew you had it.
Somehow you knew I had it, but you didn't find it. And so we get back on the bus, everything's back underneath the, you know, in the luggage carriers, all this kind of thing.
And you're breathing a sigh of relief.
I'm breathing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is good. My girlfriend at the time was crying because she thought that I was going down. And so all of a sudden, before we leave, you get back on the intercom and you say, okay, we need Tom Henderson to come to the front of the bus and bring all your stuff with you. So once again, I brought everything but the dirty laundry bag again because I thought I'm not going to go down. And so we got to the part where it's going to be like you have to go and talk to the customs people, and I believe it was you and Bill Luther together. Yes, I think you even outnumbered me. You
yes. In case you tried to run, I'd let Bill run. I don't run.
And you said, hey. We kind of heard that maybe you're trying to bring something across the border.
I think it said, and we're going to meet, we picked out this largest security person in our mind, you know. He was just massive. And I thought, we're going to tell Tom that we're going to go visit Sergeant Jones or whatever. So I say to you, well, we're going to go and have a one-on-one with Sergeant Jones. Anything you want to tell us before? Because confession is good for the soul, I've been told. Yeah. So anyway, at that point, about 10 foot, and they want us to be gone at this point, so we are not going to go in there. Yeah. But about 10 feet before the door, you go, I've got some souvenirs. I think my response was, okay, you're coming back from a mission trip with beer for your friends. That's a great mission trip. So.
Yeah. So long story short, thanks for nailing down all those details because I think each one was important and super fun to watch.
We're having a great time.
Walk down memory lane. But the funny thing is so then that night you come to my room where we're staying in the hotel prior to we're beginning the long travels back to Sioux Falls. we're over the border now in California, and you came to my hotel room and said, so have you gotten rid of the beer yet? And I said, no. And you said, okay, why don't you grab it and we'll go get rid of it together. And we're standing out in the parking lot. We're just standing out in the parking lot, and it's like motel or whatever. And
classy motel that you can get for $6 a night.
Yeah, the 6-pack of beer might have cost more. I don't even know. But I had the 6-pack, and you grabbed it, you looked at it, and I'll never forget what you did with it. I mean, I didn't know what you were doing. Yeah. And you took it and you slammed it on the ground, and it opened, exploded, and so that's what we did. And you said, "See, isn't that way more fun what we did just there than what you would have done with it back in Sioux Falls?" So, but it was such a amazing thing, and I've told that story several times to teams when I was a youth worker, and to in other situations as well, because instead of shaming me, instead of really going, "You're such a knucklehead," I mean, you did say, "Is this?" I mean, you asked a good question. Is this the best souvenir to bring home from a mission trip? So that was a good question. But instead of doing what you could have done and been mad, you just said, "Okay, you made a silly mistake, and now let's just blow it up." And we created a memory. We created an experience and a moment of transformation.
And your response was great. Because looking back, I often second guess looking back, because I don't really know what I'm going to do either. When Tom hands me a 6-pack of beer, it's like, okay, what exactly do I do with this? So anyway, I'm glad that God has used that in some kind of transformational way, because I don't know if that was the best plan.
No.
Anyway.
Well, if nothing else, it was a great memory. It was a great memory, and one that I think very fondly back on. So
that's good.
Outside of that lesson that you learned from 3 decades of working with teens and all this kind of thing. So I'm just, what are some of the things that you've just learned about teenagers specifically? Because I think that that's one of the things that we can look at teens. Yeah. And I think that a lot of people do look at teens and say, oh my goodness, what are they doing? These are the future leaders of America. I think that as the generation above them, it's easy to look down and say, oh my gosh, this world is going to hell in a handbasket, or, this is our future leaders or whatever. But I guess what are some of the things that you've learned after just 30 years of working with teenagers that you can just encourage listeners with, maybe as they think about teenagers today?
One, I think it was consistent in my ministry was willing to risk. I think people are drawn to risk takers. I mean, if you were in that first generation of First Baptist, we had a 1970 GMC bus painted 3 beautiful colors. And the first major trip, the thing broke down on it, and that was my first trip with First Baptist, so I was kind of concerned I'd be fired. And it took us, we prided ourselves on getting back on the time at the minute, and we came back from that trip a week late, missing July 4th. Mm-hmm. And that didn't hurt my reputation. That made people kind of attracted to, okay, we'll follow this guy. Mm-hmm. As compared to what you'd normally think is, the next trip, everybody's going to go, we're busy. We'd love to do that. And I think we are in a world that wants everything to be comfortable and safe. And what young people are looking for, I think, is somebody who will step out and say, let's try this. I don't know if it's going to work, but let's try it. Joel Fredrickson at The Point a few weeks ago had a great sermon, and the bottom line was Peter and stepping out of the boat. And his closing sentence to us that I've really been thinking through is, what is God calling you to step out of the boat over? Mm-hmm. And I think, there are people at The Point, young people I've worked with, who it was risky to even be around them, because parents would say, well, if you're investing in that kid, I don't know if my kid's going to be influenced by that kid, because we want our kids to come to church and be safe. And if you like that kid and invite that kid to come, then our kid's in danger. And I think the best thing we can do is risk on behalf of somebody else. Mm-hmm. And whether it's, I was telling Denise a while ago, if Joel or another youth pastor had said to me, I want to buy a bus and take off, on a 4,000-mile trip, I'd say, are you serious? That is a stupid idea. Yeah. Luckily, I had senior pastors in churches who would say, yeah, that bus looks like it can get out of the parking lot.
Yeah.
And I just think the call of Jesus is really a call to say, this is the safe way and this is a Jesus way. And sometimes they can be the same, but more often than not, I think Jesus calls us to step into a place, whether it's relationally or vocationally or financially, to say, this doesn't make sense, but I'm going to risk for something greater. And I think as a father, my children have watched me do that. Mm-hmm. And God bless my wife, Denise, because she's not wired to be a risk taker. Now, while I'm slowing down, she is going crazy, doing amazing stuff with children's pastors in the United States, but also around the world, offering them a chance to be at a table that maybe they can't afford to be at. But Denise believes, so now she has a Spanish group. And my wife, who grew up saying, let's manage all the risks, is now, it's just amazing where she's saying, yeah, I don't know if this is going to work, but let's invest in this. And that is a winsome quality that I think attracts people towards us. And so don't be afraid to risk. Because I think if there's something I wish, because to be honest, the older I got, the more difficult it was to risk. So I was sharing with my small group at the point that I remember the last Life Serve group, the last community block picnic, the block party that we did. And I remembered it because after that, it was such a frightening experience for me. I didn't want to do it again. There was a storm rolling in. You could see it. There was somebody on a corner swearing at us, get the out of there, And it turned out to be a powerful experience. Everybody remembers it. But at whatever age I was at that point, I kind of said, I think it's a great thing. I think it's a good thing. But it terrified me. And I don't want to do that. So in my next chapter, I don't want to keep going in that direction. I want to risk. I want to say, yeah, I might get beat up bad on this deal, but I think there's something to learn in the risk, and I want to become somebody who is a risk taker, and not as I get older get more cautious, but to actually say, yeah, I'm going to try that, and we'll see how it turns out. Yeah,
and even how that's played out in like the youth ministry world specifically, in saying that, going and reaching out to that kid that looks like a lost cause or that's different or whatever. That may be a risk at however you want to define that, but you don't know the potential of that conversation or that interaction, and how God wants to use them. I think about there was people that saw you as a teenager that probably said he's going to end up as a homeless person in downtown Minneapolis. Yeah. Right? That was what they thought. And then, but if they could see you now, and if they knew the way that you invested in other people. The same temptation is, I was, invited a few weeks ago again to go, and I don't do a lot of middle school and high school messages anymore, just because, the Lord's taken the ministry in a different direction. But one of the things that I'm always just very open with is, if the Lord brings those opportunities and it fits to where, I'm going to say yes. And so I was able to go back into Washington high school and speak to the entire freshman class and the entire sophomore class. Those are situations where I'm not sharing the gospel. Right. But I'm sharing my story and the impact that people have had on my life, and how so many of those people that have impacted me are the ones that are sitting in the chairs next to you. And out of that 30-minute conversation of going and then staying afterwards to talk to all of these kids, that, hoodies up, earbuds in, really, when they look at you, it feels like they just really would rather that you're not breathing, but some of those kids, as I have conversation with them before or after, they're so receptive to that conversation. And I think it goes back to what you said earlier, and it's that they feel seen.
Yeah.
And I think that as I think about, your 30 years of youth ministry specifically, and my 20 years-ish, not quite, of youth ministry focused time, that it's when we take those risks to actually see kids and make them feel like they're somebody, that is probably way more important than you ever thought it was, because a lot of them may not be seen at home.
Yeah.
And I think that your story of just even being the fourth kid, the forgotten one, I think we have a lot of forgotten kids. At least that's how they feel. And if they disappeared tomorrow, would anybody notice them? And so how we can, that's I think why I'm such a big, proponent for getting men involved in mentorship.
Yeah.
Mentoring
is so good.
In the middle schools and high schools. I mean, even in elementary for sure as well. But I think that those mentors in young kids' lives, specifically those that don't have fathers, absolutely huge. Absolutely huge.
Indeed.
So, okay, so we need to be wrapping up here in just a few minutes. But I do want to ask the question about so in a lifetime of ministry like you've had, there are times where there's disappointments, that you've seen struggles in kids' life. You've seen people walk away from the faith.
Yeah.
You've seen people maybe not respond well to you, or even and these are probably two little different things, but even when we planted the church, and we were told back in the church planting stuff, and I was only a part of the point for 3 years, and I remember when they said look, in a couple of years, you will lose over 50% of your church plant team. Yeah. And I remember having that conversation. You're like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, no way. Yep. Sure enough, we were right on schedule.
I guess the studies say what they do because they're real. But I just wondered how you've, specifically in the area of just seeing people that you've invested in, fall away from the faith, see, a falling into sin, giving up on their marriage, or those kinds of things. Just how have you been able to, I guess, process that, grieve that, and then I guess lean into the Lord on that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think the worst disappointment is with me. The times when I've let somebody down, the times when I promised to be there, and there's a couple that I reconciled with them. It took 3 years for some of these kids to forgive me for a mistake I made. So for me, the worst, the heaviest to carry is where I have disappointed somebody.
That's a good word.
And understanding God is gracious, and He is at work in my best, but He's also at work in my worst. And sometimes my worst, with God's help, is better than the best. And then for others, I think, who have made choices that break my heart, I think understand the prodigal son at any point in the journey, apart from when he comes home, would have been given up on. Right? If you saw him feeding pigs somewhere, you're going, oh, and that's Joe's son? Oh boy, he's a lost cause. And to say, well, the story's not over. I mean, that is my go-to when I feel disappointed. And also where Paul says, some people plant, some people tend, some people pick the fruit kind of deal. If I had a voice in their lives for that season, I'm going to trust that the story's not over and that God's bringing people back to them. Emily asked people to send me videos of my retirement, which yours and Laura's were so sweet. It turned out to be a 2-hour video. And so many of those, I mean, some other people are the ones I would expect, like you and Laura, it was awesome. But also kids who I didn't even know if they knew I saw them. I saw them, but I never got a registration from them saying, hey, thanks for noticing me. And then 40 for some, 30, well, maybe 30 years for some, send me this video and said, I know you saw me. I mean, they didn't say in these words, and it made a difference for me. And I never saw any of that fruit. but yet God was tending it, working, bringing other people. For some cases, I physically moved away from this particular person. For me, when I failed, just say, God, my heart is good, but I'm a fallen person. So God, would you work where I can't work and where I've even botched up? And two, God, thank you that your story is never really over.
Yeah.
And that you are bringing different people into them. And for whatever reason, I'm not in their voice, in their field of vision anymore. But God, you are always surrounding people with people who will help the prodigal find their way home. And so Reed DeVries says, don't take success personally and don't take failure personally. If you take success personally, then you have to take failure personally. So understand you're faithful to doing what you're doing, and then God's going to do the results. And whether you think it's a success or failure, only time will really define that. But don't take credit for it or blame for it, which was a huge grace message to me who likes to blame myself a lot.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I think about, and you said something as a part of that I think was so key is, sometimes that healing takes time, like, especially in that where you feel that you've failed. I mean, we've all had moments like where we feel like we failed it as a dad, or we failed as a friend, we failed as a husband, right? And the most important thing that we can do is to own that and say, I'm sorry. Without excuse, without whatever, but and recognizing, okay, I'm admitting that I'm very sorry for this, and how do we restore that relationship? And that may not happen as quick as we'd like, and oftentimes it doesn't. But yet but owning that is such an important thing. And then that's what a good reminder too, to just know that God is always at work. Because I think that it's easy to be like, oh, I'm so disappointed, and like to, write someone off or whatever. But for you to always say, man, the prodigal can always come home.
Yeah.
The prodigal can always come home. So that's such an important piece there. So as we kind of end our time here, I guess one final question before then I have something that I'm going to ask you to just, we just give the final word is what we call it here. It's 60 to 90 seconds, whatever the Lord lays on your heart to just kind of, to share a word of encouragement, challenge, whatever to listeners. But I've, as you have now officially retired from like full-time ministry, I know that you bring a ministry mindset and ministry heart wherever you go, whether it's if you're at Menards 8 times a day, or you're sitting at, you're seeing people in their neighborhood or whatever, you will always carry that mindset. So I'm just interested in you've got a lot of years ahead of you still. But as you think about it right now, what does it mean for you to finish well? I think one of the difficult things for guys especially is when they retire and their identity's been wrapped up in, just their career and their business card and just because it's what they've done. It's been so much a part of their life. And then they struggle with like, ooh, what does this next season look like? And who am I really?
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's been part of the process for you, as you just have kind of, entered into this. You're kind of new into this still.
Well, yeah, and I've made myself purposely busy so I didn't have to deal with it, to be honest.
Okay, so you're repairing chimneys on the fly just because.
Yeah, but it's So I mean, there was a part of me that said I don't want to really deal with that right now, so I'm going to be busy. And I understand that's a short term. I even found that myself going to a solitary mode instead of being social, and I realized, I need to correct that. So
as you think of finishing well,
I would think in the whole concentric circles, kind of working what is most important and what can only you do, and then figure those out from there. And I'm really glad that I've got 2 grandchildren who are less than 2 miles from me. This morning, took them we had a sleepover with them last night and played in the snow yesterday and all this stuff. And on the way there, Hazel, who's 7, says to me, "Grandpa, you're the funniest grandpa in the world." It's like, oh, I live for that.
Kind of
deal.
Great title.
But
You should have business cards created just for that.
So I want my family to know they're the most important people in my life right now. And so to hit pause, I do have another project going on in my life that's screaming at me to get done. But when Denise said, would this work for you? It works for me. Could they come and spend the night with us and spend the day? And then, I said, okay, where's that pause button? I need to put the pause button on what my mind is screaming and saying is important. I need to get this house done, ready to get rented or whatever. And they say, no, that's not the most important. And so right now, with my granddaughter giving us our first great-grandchild.
Yeah, no kidding.
I know, I'm way too young for being a great-granddad. Trying to figure how, with the physical distance, do we make sure she knows that she is a priority and her son is a priority for us. And then service would be the next thing. I want to be involved in service, and I don't think I want to say this out loud yet, but there's some things in the community that I'm seeing there's a need, and I could step in it. It maybe with the police force, or maybe with the Sioux Falls Public Schools. But how can I serve in a meaningful way that's consistent with it, that doesn't cause me to break commitment to my inner core? So family, service, my church. I'm so fortunate that I've been able to stay involved at the point and be pastor emeritus, and that Joel Frederickson has just blessed me. And he's doing such a great job. So I'm trying to live mindful of those concentric circles and not get something as mundane as a new floor in a house screw up what's really important. And that's where I'm trying to stay focused on that.
Yeah.
Most days I do okay. Some days I'm way off base.
Well, and I know that, again, you enter each day with that spirit of blessing. And we talked a few minutes ago, and we shared the funny memory of Mexico and that. But there's so many other memories that I have in my life that were just super influential. And I think about the years at Camp Judson and doing the blessing service, right?
Yes.
Where again, I put that into practice in Oregon, but having a camp time where counselors and people, the directors of the camp would come and just be in a line, and we'd talk about the power of blessing, and all the kids could come up and just have a prayer of blessing and speaking words of encouragement and who Christ sees in them and who they are, and that word of blessing. And I think about just how you've modeled that, and then how every single one of us again can be a part of that in someone's life every single day. And, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about, Alan, is, just in this, not that I'm getting super old, but I'm getting 47 soon, but I look at it and say, okay, so, legacy, and what does that look like? And how do I not just finish like the end of my life well, but what does it mean to finish each day well? Right. We define success by a lot of times in the ways that the world would define success. But what at the end of the day would cause us to lay our head on the pillow and feel successful that day, to have finished that day well? And just recapping some of the stuff we've talked about here, just the ability to see people and bless people, speak life into people, which is what, men whose life in Christ speak, give life to others. That's the whole focus of this. And you've just done that so well. So, I would tell you that I see you finishing well. In no way are you finished. No way are you finished. You've got a lot of years ahead of you, but thanks for just kind of laying that foundation and modeling that continuously. So, I guess what would you have to say? 30 or 60 to 90 seconds. Anything that the Lord just kind of downloads into you, says, "Here's this is just a final word of for listeners." There.
And this comes a little bit of a surprise. I'm going to take this angle on it. I think it was Henry Nouwen that said, "At midlife, you have to repay your emotional debts." And I think for you didn't wait for midlife. And that's, I think, what Henry Nouwen is trying to say is there's a bill coming, and take care of it. There were some bad things in my life that I haven't spoken of. That was in my background, that was in my head, that it was in everything that I saw, and I had the courage to, with therapy, deal with that as much as I could. and kept my bill manageable. I think people who retire with a bunch of baggage, they're a ticking time bomb. And so if there's things that are part of your childhood, part of your marriage relationship, part of other relationships that there's when Ephesians says, don't let the sun go down on that baggage. I think there's a sense of, to make today happen for me at this stage in my life, I am so glad that about 20 years ago, I realized I'm a broken person. And there are things that people did to me as a child that I didn't want to admit. I certainly didn't want to tell Denise about that. Frederick Buechner, in his book Telling Secrets, challenges to find the people you are closest to and be completely honest. Let you have the experience of knowing they love you, not just for who you pretend to be, but who you are. And so my marriage with Denise, she knows my past, the stuff that I'm excited about, the stuff that I don't want to tell you, that I don't want to admit. And we get to this place in our marriage for the future. It's just a blessing. It's just looking forward to it. It's we're excited about our lives together, but it's partly because we've handled the emotional debts of childhood and young adulthood back there. And so now I'm not carrying a burden into this. Does that making sense? And we tend to all know what that is, right?
But to face it,
yes,
so that we don't continue to carry it into the different seasons we have. Yeah.
So when my father died, it was just a crazy situation, because that's a crazy relationship. It was a year later that we gathered in Wisconsin and buried him. And that brought some closure, but that by itself wouldn't have brought closure. I had to do my work before that we gathered in the township cemetery. And I think there's things that we just keep dragging along because we don't have the courage and willing to risk. I mean, I remember telling my wife, I remember where I was and how it unfolded about my childhood, and risked having her say, okay, I did not sign up for this, right? Yeah. This is crazy. You're not the perfect person I thought I married. Instead, she said, I loved you. I love you. And I heard her in God's voice. And for the first time, I think I realized I'm not doing ministry to please God. I'm doing ministry because God's invited me to partner with him to spill and splash love into people. But it took dealing with that, like 25 years ago, so that when we go into this chapter, we're not still lugging that trunk around with us.
Yeah. All right. That's good. Well, Alan, thank you. Thank you for spending this time with me, with all of us.
I'm so proud of you.
And it truly is a joy to just have been such a large part of your life, and just the way that you've invested in me and my family. So I can't thank you enough. And just know that I love you, and that I am one of the biggest reasons I am who I am today is because of you. And as I shared on this other podcast, that if I am seen as even half the spiritual leader and servant-hearted individual as you are, then I would consider my life a success, because that is who you are. And so thank you for spending time with me here today and having this conversation.
Thank you. My pleasure. All right.
Thanks again for joining me for my conversation with Alan. I hope you found it to be both meaningful and helpful. If so, I encourage you to share with others that may find it to be those things as well. And also don't forget to head to resgen.org to reserve your spots to join us on February 4th for ResGen Men's Summit 2023, and on the 2nd or 3rd for our couples event, Date Night Comedy. Thanks again for joining me today, everybody. We'll see you next time for another episode of the ResGen Giving Life Podcast. Until then, continue being men whose life in Christ gives life to others.